Hi guys, welcome to our next lesson. We'll be talking about transit planning today, and we have Mr. CJ Bright with us.
Hi.
He is the Director of Evolving Mobility. So he'll be just telling us a little bit about his job, so we'll let him get started with that.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here and give you a quick overview of what I do. So essentially, as the Director of Evolve Mobility, I work with cities and transit agencies to use modern technology to help them figure out how to provide mobility for people in the community in an equitable fashion so that they can get around without having cars.
So what excites you about your job?
Actually, there's quite a bit, but I would say if I really had to think about it, the variety of it. I'm really lucky that I work for a company that is not just focused in one community, that I get to go across the US and Canada and help cities to improve their mobility needs.
So it sounds like you get to move around a lot.
Yes, I feel like sometimes I'm on the road more than I'm home. I've been really fortunate to travel to places around the US and Canada that I never thought I would go to on my own, but it's been positive experiences. Our global headquarters is in Paris, so I've gone there for work. I've received training in Tel Aviv, in Israel. So, I'm a road warrior.
Wow, that's very exciting, all over the place. Can you live anywhere in the US and be able to do this type of job?
So for my company, yes, I do not have to necessarily live in the same city as the headquarters, which is in Boston, uh, because my job essentially is going out in the field and also interacting with customers in person. Fingers crossed next year. Yeah, I can live anywhere I want in the country. But if I were to work for a specific transit agency or government, then I would have to be in that community.
Okay. So there's kind of different options for people to be able to look at.
Yes, so particularly in the transit industry, there's the public side and then there's the quasi-private side, the contractors, and I work for one of the contractors because we are hired by different agencies and communities to operate services for them. And because of that, I'm allowed to live wherever I want because there's no one primary focus for me.
That sounds great. Are there any limitations on your personal and social life because of your work?
To be honest, yes and no. There's a lot of flexibility when work isn't um, too heavy. To be honest, I've taken calls from a beach just because when you work remote, they really do mean remote. As long as you can log in and do your job, where you are is not that big of an issue. But at the same time, when work is very demanding or when there's a very tight deadline to deliver results for a project, I tend to have to put everything else to the side and focus on getting the job done. And that can be okay if it's once in a while, but if it's for an extended period, it can be very tiring.
What kind of projects do you work on?
I work on quite a bit of projects actually. So my title again is Evolving Mobility, and that means I'm working with not just your regular buses, trains, streetcars, but we're also looking at microtransit, which is essentially the Uber version of public transit, where you could call for a vehicle to show up at your door. It may look like an Uber, but it's actually operated by your local bus company. So if you're in Dallas, it's a Dart owned a piece of Uber and did all the service themselves. Also, I'm in charge of deploying our self-driving autonomous vehicles. We had a project in Montreal last year, and we also had a project in Las Vegas. And we're hoping to have a few more projects in the next couple of years going online where the vehicles are about 70% autonomous. They tend to drive themselves.
Wow, so do you think cars are going to be driving us around all the time now?
I don't think so. I think it'll still be a good 30 years away because you need to really invest in infrastructure to make it feasible. So it's not just having a self-driving car. You need to have the traffic lights be upgraded to talk to the cars. You need the roads to be paved and very visible markings so that the vehicle can see where it's going. There's actually quite a bit that has to be done for that project to really become commonplace across the country.
Wow, I don't think as many people think about the fact of what you have to create in the environment around a car to make it to allow a self-driving car to work. Everyone just always thinks about the self-driving car, but that's really interesting.
You know, so one of my employees, he is the autonomous vehicle expert, and you know, he spends so much time on the ground, not only evaluating every 12 inches of the route, but he's recording it and then doing an analysis of what exactly needs to be upgraded or changed. Sometimes you have to cut this tree limb, or you have to put a stop sign right here, just to make sure that it's safe enough for the vehicle to operate.
Oh, it's a little bit of outdoors work. That's nice.
There's actually, well, in my department, we do a lot of outdoors work.
I love being outdoors. I think everybody with the pandemic is looking for something that will keep them outside a little bit more.
So, for me personally, the pandemic has made me become a desk employee because I have not been on an airplane since March. Normally, I'm probably on an airplane 3 times out of the month, if not more.
Oh, wow. Well, that brings us to, what is the most satisfying thing about your job? Is it money, vacation, coworkers, a retirement, if our students understand what that means yet?
Um, it's none of that. For me, I actually am very passionate about what I do. I grew up in New York City. I grew up in the South Bronx projects, and riding transit wasn't really a choice. It was something that I had to do to get around. And I just love the idea of moving people and how transit can connect you to so many different opportunities. And helping to do that today is very soul satisfying.
Oh, that's amazing. Um, I think, especially here too, the amount of transit is slowly, we're seeing it increase in Dallas as well. New York and Chicago, those different places have always been a little bit ahead of us, but I think we're starting to finally get some more of we now have the train that goes back and forth from Fort Worth to Dallas. They talk about putting in hopefully some transit from Austin to Dallas, bigger cities too. So I think we're going to see hopefully an expansion in this field as well.
You know, there's a lot going on in Dallas. I've been going to the Metroplex for the last 12 or so years, just visiting friends, sometimes work related. And the system that I first saw in 2008 is not the same system that I saw, a year or two ago. There's a lot more happening with, trains crisscrossing the area. And, as more people move to the Metroplex, cars can't be the only solution. There's something that's called induced demand, meaning the more lanes of road you build, the more people will drive. So you may get a year or two of traffic relief by expanding highways, but then it fills up again because now people are saying, oh, traffic went down, so now I can drive more. But in reality, all they're doing is just restarting the process again, which is why you may have 14-lane highways in the area, because everybody feels that they can drive everywhere without causing a traffic jam, and that's just not possible.
Yes, well, I will say that the zero traffic during the pandemic was probably the only good thing that came out of it for me trying to get to work. When I was driving, I was the only one on the road. Can both girls and guys do your job?
Oh, of course. There are no limitations to this job. And I've been really fortunate over the years to come across some fantastic women who are in the field. Sometimes people don't necessarily realize how male-dominated an industry has been historically. But, I think as time progresses, more women kind of find out about what you can do. And yeah, I see no issue with a woman doing this job. You know, we try to encourage representation in our company, and get people to explore all the possibilities of their career choice.
Well, that's great to hear. We're going to move on to just some questions about the education and training that it takes to be able to do a job like this, just so the
Okay.
students can get a feel of what they might need to be doing in their futures if they want to follow in your footsteps. Does your job require a high school, community college, or what type of degree plan?
So I would say there's no set rule to get to where you're going. It's very company specific. Um, and as you progress in the company, or companies, your experience becomes more important than the degree that you have. But the degree you have is a great door opener for your very first job. So for my exact path, I graduated high school, went to college, and got my master's, which was in urban planning with a focus on public transportation. Um, I learned throughout the course of it that I could have stopped with my undergraduate and could have gotten into the industry that way. I have an employee who honestly started out as a bus operator and then moved up in the rankings from bus operator to supervisor to management, and then went into autonomous vehicles, which is how he got to be that expert. Because to operate an autonomous vehicle, it's not necessarily understanding all the sciences behind the vehicle. It's more about understanding the mechanics of the vehicle. And so when you are a bus operator, you learn how your bus works. And then when you become a supervisor, you have some training and light maintenance of vehicles. And then it goes on and go forth. So there's multiple paths you can take. What's important is to build upon that path every so often. So you must be able to continue to refine your skills and grow. And I think when you follow that mentality, that ideal, there's really no limit to what you can do.
Well, I always love to hear that you can grow through a field and kind of it changes as you progress as well. And I just wanted to ask, you said you'd gone to university. Do you think most universities have degrees or types of plans that could get you to this type of job?
To be honest, that's a really good question. So urban planning and public transportation is historically a graduate level program. I have seen colleges around the country that offer a variation of it, whether it's geography, which is what my undergraduate degree is in. And that was a great start to get into the industry. But and not to age myself, but I graduated college, 12, almost 13 years ago. And there was only a handful of undergraduate urban planning programs. But I know that since I left, additional colleges have taken that on. So it may be more of a viable solution now than it was when I was in college.
Okay. Well, it's also nice to know the geography is like kind of the path. That's one that I know is fairly typical for a college to
Yes.
have available. And if any students have questions about what schools around Texas have these degree plans, reach out to me and I'll have that information available for you in the future.
Of course, and to be honest, I live in Chicago. I went to grad school in Chicago, and we had a program through the Chicago Transit Authority that hired interns from actually as early as high school to college to graduate school and some PhDs. And it came from various disciplines. So you didn't have to have a geography undergraduate degree to get into the program. You could apply, you can articulate why you necessarily want a particular path, and then they can work with you if they have the space available for it. I would encourage, your students to, if they have an interest in public transit, and there's more than just transit planning in that particular field, it's quite a bit actually, to just, call your local transit agency. or submit their resume, saying that they're interested in an internship, and see where it goes from there, because you never know what options are there until you extend yourself. And just a quick story, my second internship, they didn't have a job posted. I submitted my resume and I received a call the next day. And not only did I get an internship, that turned into my career for the first 7 years. I worked at that company. So, don't be afraid to just, put yourself out there and say, I'm interested in this, because it can come back and pay dividends.
Well, I will definitely put in the bio of this video, as well as the survey, a link to our local transit agency, just to let students be able to click on it and look around for the DFW area in particular.
Yes.
So the next question is, does your job change often? And if it does, how do you keep your knowledge and your skills updated as you go?
Again, my title is Director of Evolving Mobility. So the nature of my job does change, and it has changed a couple of times over the last few years, right? So the first major change was the expansion of the internet. And again, I'm aging myself, so please, kids, don't laugh too hard. I'm 34. When I was in middle school, the internet was still fairly new, and it wasn't on your phone, really. So when I got to college, transit agencies started having mobile websites, and that allowed for companies like Google to start providing you with transit directions. And so it made it easier to figure out how to get from A to B without having to call a transit agency. So you had the schedules online, you could look everything up and plan your own route. Then eventually came real-time information, which meant that customers could now see when the next bus was coming, when the next train was coming. Then you have your Ubers and your Lyfts, right? And so that completely changed the industry, because now people are like, I can call a vehicle and it'll show up to my door within a couple of minutes. Why should I wait 15, 20 minutes for a bus or train to come when I can get a car directly? That was a major shift in the industry. And we're still actually trying to figure out what we're doing. But at the same time, I think the last couple of years, we've responded, and we're doing it right now with one of our projects, which is how to help cities understand the complete mobility picture rather than just the picture from a transit rider perspective. And that's actually involved me personally interacting with people around the world in our company to leverage technology, because countries respond to stuff differently and there's different uses of technology. And so our partners in France are able to analyze data in a way that I can't begin to comprehend. But by them analyzing the data and providing me with something that I can understand, it helps me to talk to the communities better about how people are moving around. And so essentially what I'm saying is that technology is always changing. And so for me to keep up, I have to maybe not master each technology, but I have to understand how it's changing, how it's impacting mobility in the communities. And it helps to keep me on my toes, but it also helps me as a planner offer cities more responsive, more flexible plans to improve mobility.
Okay, that's amazing. So just a little more about kind of the work conditions and environments you're in. You talked about that you do during the pandemic, you've been mostly a desk worker, but prior to the pandemic, were you a little more outdoors? You said you did travel a lot, but how was your normal day?
I do not have a normal day, especially pre-pandemic. Some days I'm flying to meetings with the clients, face to face. Some days I am out riding the buses and trains and taking notes from the lens of a passenger, and also the lens of a future contractor on how we can make improvements. And so most of my job was actually not home. I was usually on the road or on an airplane going somewhere.
Well, what is the most fun place or interesting place you've gotten to go to?
Okay, give me a second. Let me think about that. You know what? I have to admit, this is going to sound completely random, but I truly enjoy going to Reno, Nevada. Their transit system is very robust for a city of its size and the environment it's in. It's not a very, so normally you equate crowded buses with very dense cities.
Mhm.
But in Reno, it's not necessarily a very dense city, but there's corridors where a lot of people are riding transit to get to where they're going. And the buses were, you know, and sometimes like clockwork, they'd show up on time. And then working with the client who was very forward thinking and really wanting to make transit not just for people who don't have a choice, but for something that everyone would want to ride because it was convenient. And they are part of the city government and the county government. So, they were building this was called a bus rapid transit, which is a high frequency bus route that makes limited stops. And may have some infrastructure that can bypass red lights. It can have its own lane of traffic so that cars aren't, blocking it. And they would build, high density housing around these stations so that, if you're going downtown, you just walk a couple of feet to the BRT station, and then you're downtown in 10 minutes. So being able to help them understand all the different opportunities that they could have with transit mobility in their community was just been fantastic. And the scenery is beautiful in Reno because it's in the mountains.
That is one of the few states I have never been to, so I will have to go check it out and well, eventually when the pandemic ends and we can all fly again.
Fingers crossed, 'cause I miss airplanes.
I know it's starting to. I live in a lab, but it's starting to slowly creep in and affect me a little bit. So, just questions about the finances of your job. Are you paid by the hour, on a commission, salary? Kind of.
So I'm a salary employee. Most desk jobs in the transit industry are salaried in terms of, especially if you're management or above. If you were to work, say, on like the customer service side, then that would be more of an hourly rate.
Okay. And then, has your job been affected by the changes in the economy due to the pandemic?
So my job, um, in terms of finances, no, because um, I don't necessarily. What I do is not directly in response to the service levels that we operate. If I were a bus operator or a train operator where services have been changed, then I would more likely have been impacted. But for what I do, what my team does, we are not necessarily impacted by the pandemic.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. I usually like to ask everybody at the end, we do have, various ages of students watching, who are, kind of sometimes may not see all the options they can do in the future, or think that, I'm back here and I remember when I was in middle school, and if somebody had told me I'd be doing what I'm doing today, I would have told them they were crazy. But what advice do you have for students who are just kind of slowly finding their passions and what they want to do?
Take your time. You do not have to know what you want to do for the rest of your life when you're 17 years old applying to colleges. I know that's something that we're told, but it is a little bit unrealistic. Take all the time that you need to identify what you like. You may actually have more than one passion. I do, right? So I love transit. I love buses, planes. I love moving people. But I'm probably at some point going to switch over and then open a gym and then run a gym until I retire. Um, so, you don't have to figure everything out. And the second thing is, don't be afraid to find out if you like something or not. You may think that you like it, and then you have an internship or you take some classes and you say it's not for me, and that is perfectly okay. We put so much pressure on people to know early on what it is they're going to do that it does take the joy out of discovery and finding yourself. So please just don't put too much pressure on yourself. I'm fortunate. I've known what I wanted to do my entire life, but I also know that that's not everybody else. And being able to get to know yourself, you know, your interests is so valuable. And I hope that you'll take that seriously.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Anytime.
Thank you to all the students who are watching. Do not forget to do your 2-minute survey at the end of all the transit lesson, interview, and activity. It's very quick. As you guys know by now, it's only a couple of questions just to make sure you get credit so that we can get you your certificate and for finishing this course. So thank you again, Mr. Bright, and I hope that all the students will be joining us for the next lesson as well.